If they break it, it will come. If they break it, it will come.
What the? Who's there? If they break it, it will come? What the hell does that mean? Must be hearing things.
If they break it, it will come.
Oh, come on. Who is there? No, not you. The beast is back. Hey folks, welcome back to the channel. And indeed, yes, the beast is back. And for those who don't know, and you probably don't because the videos on this have long been gone, it's a long story, but this used to be my bike. I bought this as a project bike. This is an '89 Kawasaki ZX10 Ninja, E-box frame Ninja. And I spent about a year going through it because it was a complete and utter mess. And ultimately sold it to a friend of mine, good friend of mine and customer, who lives somewhat south of me. So yeah, he reached out to me actually quite a while ago because it wasn't running right and it smells like fuel when it runs and it dies. But at higher throttles, it's okay. Throttle positions, like when you get over about 4,000 RPM. So we got some carburation issue. He said it started after he put gas in it and it was after one of the storms we had. And he thinks that maybe got some bad gas. And that's possible, but I'm pretty sure I had inline filters on those fuel lines, or at least a new fuel cock with the built-in filter. So I seriously doubt any particulate got into the carburetors, but it's possible. So what we're gonna end up doing is diagnosing that through some disassembly. I'm going to run it for you here in a minute, but we're going to go through it and figure out what the problem is. There's a couple other issues that I'm seeing right off the bat as well. Let me get it up in the air and we'll go over those as well and probably end up addressing those. I love it when I get it up. As far as any aesthetics, bodywork stuff goes, so I'm not going to be doing any of that because number one, I'm not really set up for it. Number two, I suck at it. So we're going to leave that alone. We'll definitely deal with the fuel system, as I said before. But over here, this concerns me. I didn't notice this yesterday. And I don't know why this would have happened, because you know me, I rebuild stuff and make it, 10 times better than the OEM. The brake slave cylinder is leaking, or has been leaking. Taking the paint off the side cover that I put on. And that is a sprocket cover, so this got to come off this has got to come off. This can come off rather without the sprocket cover, but I think I'm going to end up pulling the sprocket cover and repainting it for him because that really shouldn't have happened. Now, this was a couple of years ago. I don't know how many years ago. It could have been 3-4 years ago. I don't know. It really shouldn't happen. I don't know if he's been flushing the brake fluid in both the clutch and the brake system. But yeah, we're going to delve into this because this is going to need to be fixed. And I don't want to leave it like this. We'll run some fresh paint over this cover and clean that up. And this is wet down here. I would imagine that's from, yeah, that's from your brake fluid. Yeah, it's the only thing I can think of because I don't see any other place that it could be leaking from besides that. So we'll have to clean all that up and fix that. So anyway, what did I say? I was going to start it for you, right? Let me get set up, get the key, and we're going to go over a couple other things, and then we'll get to disassembling. The one good thing about knowing a bike that you used to own and sold, like I know this one, is the way that it used to run. I could start this up with the enricher, sometimes even without the enricher, and within 20 seconds or so, take the enricher off and it would go right into an idle and stay in the idle and it would run smooth as hell. This thing was so dialed in that it was just insanely fast. Let me put the enricher on. Got the fuel on. And it smell, I don't know, I know you can't smell it. I don't have smell-o-vision, but it smells like fuel. Smells extremely rich. Yeah, something's up. As soon as you get into this thing at all, it just dies. That's slow circuit. Yeah, she don't want to run at all, even hardly with the enricher on. Yep, all right, well, you get the idea. Like I said, I know this bike, and I know how it ran when I sold it. And I think you know from, you're crooked. Not that kind of crooked, this kind of crooked. I think you know from the work I do on my channel, I don't screw around when it comes to carbs. Carburetors, carbers? Yeah, carburetors are, and I've said this 100 times, but I said it once, precision fuel metering instruments. That's enough to say. Okay, thanks for watching. What are we gonna do? We gotta drain the fuel out of the tank, and I don't even know if I have enough room in one of my cans, so you know. So I'll have to go dig something up, and we'll have to drain the tank. Now we're gonna do that right from the fuel line. I'm not gonna show any of that, because we gotta get this tank lighter. I can't lift that up. Even if it was down on the ground here, my back is so pooched, there's just no way I could do that. My doctor would be going, no lifting gas tanks for you. So yeah, that's what we're gonna have to do. That's what I'm gonna do off camera. I'm gonna go ahead and get this tank off, the seat, the tank, drain the tank first, of course, and probably the side covers. And I think I gotta pull this belly pan to take the side covers off. See, when I sold it, it didn't have the belly pan on it. That's something that I didn't do. I set this up with, I'll show you a picture of this as sold, like about right here. I didn't have the belly pan on it. He had all that done after he bought it. And since the side pan, the belly pan's connected to the side panels, yeah, I got to take that off. So we'll pull the belly pan. I take the side covers off because it's just easier to get in here for stuff, especially, I got to do on the other side anyway to get that clutch sleeve. So we'll take these off, set them aside safely. You know, on the roof or something like that. It's a good place for them. And then we'll get into it from there, as I said. You know, I worked on this bike a million times while I was working on the bike, and it's amazing what you forget. Because I couldn't even remember how to get the seat off. I had to look it up, I swear to God. I work on a lot of stuff though, but. Keihin CVKs, and by the way, the CVK stands for Constant Velocity Keihin, CVK. So that's, you know, I'm used to these carbs, they're not a big deal. So what I'm going to do now is just pull them. The best thing to do is just take them off and put them on the rack, put them on the bench, and we'll drain them, see what comes out, and then see if there's any dirt or crap that comes out of any of the carbs. That's a good indicator. And it's not terribly hard on these. There's one thing nice about these are real easy to work on because of the angle of the carbs and the access. Pull the air box, pull the carb, loosen the carb band clamps, and then you can break the carbs off of the, well, not break them, but remove them from the rubber carb holders. And then I think you need to do that to get at the, to get in here to get the throttle cables out. It's not hard at all, it really isn't. So let's do that. The only issue I've seen on these types of carb setups, the inline 4s, Kawasaki's in particular, the air boxes distort over the years, and then sometimes it's very difficult to get the air boxes rubbers to seal up to each individual carb. That's the only thing I've really seen on some of these. The ZX7 is that way, at least the one I worked on. It was a real prick. I had to modify some things to get the thing to bolt back up. That thing I think is held into the back of the carb with some bolts or something, but this one I don't believe has that problem. We just loosen these spring guys off, and then this guy is like a battery type cable, I'm sorry, battery strap type, and we just pop the sucker off. Like that sound effect? Come on. If I was trying to keep you on there, you would have freaking jumped off. Hey whiz. Let's get that out of the way. And come to Papa. Well, it don't look bad. I mean, it's not like it's soaking with fuel. on the intake side here, so that looks okay. Take a look at the carbs from the rear. I always like to look at it from the rear. These, of course, are your vents. They just go down. And slides are feeling pretty good. Yeah, they feel real good. There's a way to test these. You hit this port here with an air compressor. Just start gentle with lower pressure, and the air flowing through it is going to raise up your slide, because, you know, that's the velocity of the air going through that raises that up with the diaphragm, the negative pressure up top side, and pulling the thing up. I don't see anything jumps out at me right now. This guy's a little wet on number 3 around the air jets here. The other 3 are not like that. So we'll have to keep that in mind. Take a look at number 3. I bet you that's a telltale sign there might be something going on this one carb, if not all of them. All right, I'm gonna loosen the band clamps up. I'll do this off camera, but I'll put you back on when I go to pull the actual rack out. But let me just loosen the band clamps up. Yeah, we'll have to do that. Number 1 band clamp was completely loose. This is a fuel pump bike, I forgot. Yeah, so the line coming up to the fuel T, there's a fuel T there. The line coming up to the fuel T is down below here. I gotta take that off. I forgot about that. I forgot it was a fuel pump bike, which makes sense because it's got a straight on-off fuel cock. So we gotta get this off carefully. Uh-oh. Here's another problem. Oh boy. It really looks like this fuel joint on number 3 is leaking. And that's where we're getting that smell of gas. Oh, crap. I did these. I think I did them. I'm pretty sure I have them, actually, somewhere. I have the fuel joint O-rings for this. I've seen them kicking around. Let me show you what I mean. This one looks like it's wet right in there, you see? Yeah, that's not good. And like I said, I'm pretty sure I did these. Well, we may be doing them again then, won't we? There should be some fuel up in here. Yes, not much though. Oh yeah, that's looser. Wow, that's loose. Well, we're going to be splitting this rack. There ain't no question about it. If I remember correctly, it was kind of difficult to figure them out too, but maybe that's not the case. I don't remember exactly. I could be wrong. I've been wrong once. Give her a lever. Oh, come on, baby. There we go. Simple, simple stuff. Boy, these are so light compared to those round slides like what are they called? The VM carbs on like the KZ1000 and stuff. My God, these are light compared to that. Those things weigh about 5 million pounds. Yep, well there's a problem right there. I'm gonna have to search around here and see what we got. I'm hoping I can find those, and I have all of them rather. I'm gonna need 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of them for the other joints. Oh, stop leaking. Well, this one's stuck, so I'm gonna have to get back to you. All right, I got it. Now I gotta get I got that. That's weird. I know what happened. I don't know why, but that little space on that's hard to explain. Maybe I'll show it to you. I don't know. I got it out. This little slot here where the cable goes through and then it turns to the side, the adjoining one on the back side for the, I guess that's the throttle pull, yeah. This little spot, narrow it up somehow. I don't know how I would have gotten it in like that. I don't remember crimping it, so I had to kind of spread it apart with a screwdriver to get that cable out. I don't know what the hell happened. I don't think somebody's been in here, so, besides me. All right, now first things first, I'll give you a recommendation here. Before you do anything else, especially in a setup like this, I always, and I mean always, look inside the openings of the intake with a light, preferably, and then I shove them with paper towels, close them off. But anyway, what I was saying is I always do this. Always, always, always. It's like a ritual, because I want to make sure there's absolutely no chance of anything to being down in there that I dropped in, you know, moving these carbs around, and then the next thing you know, you're sucking a little nut or a bolt or something into the intake and destroying the top end. That'd suck. So I visualized it and checked it. Isn't that the same thing? And now we're plugged. All right, little TP for the bung hole. All right, I got them up, just laying on the stand here. This stand doesn't work well on these carbs, but just laying here for now. Let me show you what I got. There's a bunch of varnishy gunk on number 3 here, which kind of correlates to what we saw earlier with the crap around the air jets here. I didn't really see this part until I took them off, just some junk. You smell it, it smells like varnish. So there's one thing. The other thing is about this this fuel tee here. There's like a detent in it. You can move it around and it detents into a notch almost. And I could definitely see some wetness in there on the inside. Now, as far as when you go to start this thing, that's when the fuel pump pumps. When this thing's running, of course, the fuel pump's pumping, and it smells of gas. Now, there wasn't any gas in the air box. That thing would have been wet because I just ran it. And if it was overflowing, in other words, out the back of the carbs here, which it may be, you know, it may be somewhat overflowing, but I think with the external fuel leakage is coming from this tee right here. This is just not very tight at all. So I don't remember if I actually did this. I'm trying to think. I don't believe I had to split these carbs, but I may have. I just don't remember doing it. If I did this, I would have put new O-rings in. I don't know why it'd be leaking now. So what we could do is solve the other issues, turn the carbs upside down, and pressure test the rack. And if we lose pressure out any of these joints, then we know for sure. But I'm pretty sure that this O-ring is bad in here, or at least one of them on this side. And again, I'm not really sure why. So that would be my guess at this point as why we smell so much fuel when it's running. It could certainly be just from one of the carbs overflowing and the cylinder is extremely rich, you know, or more than one cylinder doing the same thing. But at this point, it looks like there was a little wetness around here. So I'm gonna probably order up all the stuff I need, O-rings and stuff. These float bowl O-ring gaskets suck. They always need to be replaced, so we'll get those at least as well. Maybe a new float set for each one, or the float valve set rather, and take it from there. The next step is we'll pull this apart, and I'll show you what we find when the carbs are upside down after I drain them. We'll take a look at what's in the float bowl area. Well, apparently I started recording without the mic on, so here we go. This is what I'm doing. We're going to take all the covers off the carbs, the float bowls that is. In this configuration is 4, 3, 2, 1 because we're upside down. So I've already done 1 and 2. Here's 1, the float bowl. I'll show you the tops here in a moment. Reposition the camera, you know, down looking at the floats. Number 2, not bad. Number 3 is the one that we were, you know, looking at before, saying, things that make you go, not, you know, that's not too bad either. Huh. What the hell?
What the hell?
Number 4's got some crud right down there in the bottom by the drain. Not really, they don't really smell too bad as far as varnish goes. But there's no question there's some gunk in here. Most likely it's the slow circuit that's plugged. So, you know, it is what it is. We're going to have to clean these out, but like I said before, I'm pretty sure that we're going to have to do the deed on the fuel tee here. This is what I meant before. It's got like a little notch in. You know, it's not bad. It doesn't feel terrible, but I could see some liquid out that side. So, well, we could try it right now and see what happens. Why don't we do that? Let's just run a pressure test on it and see which one's failing, if anything. That's a really good idea, actually. I'm glad you thought of it. We'll run a pressure test on this rack and see how it is. If it passes the pressure test, then really all we got to do at that point is A, make a decision whether we want to shotgun these while it's out now, or because I think I did those, and B, just do a cleaning. Yeah, I think you can see the gauge pretty good there. Pump them up. Pump up the volume. Oh, never mind. Well, we're at 4.5 psi right now, and that sucker ain't budget. Yeah, we're still at 4.5 psi. Let's go ahead and spray these with some soapy water, the fuel joints, and move it around a bit. We are, when you rotate it up, we are losing a little pressure now, but I don't see it bubbling anywhere. Oh, yep, there it is. I was right. Stand by and I'll show you. You pump it back up. You're gonna love this. All right, now take a look in there. You see it bubbling? and we're losing pressure on the gauge. So that confirms it. We're going to have to split this rack. So I thought so. I had a gut feeling that that was leaking because of that evidence, and also just the way it felt. It's not leaking much, but you can't have any leakage there, and I mean zero. So we're going to go ahead and be doing that. But that's how we test that. A little bit of soapy water, pressure tested. It's still at 4 because I pumped it back up, but we are gradually coming down now. When I first started, what happened was we were in a spot that it was good still because I had angled this down. But remember, this thing likes to live about right there. And when we're living right there, as you can see, she's a bubbling.
Ah, fuck. That's bullshit.
A few moments later.
All right, folks, in this part of the video, I'm going to go ahead and unrack these carbs, kind of show you how I do that in some detail. Hopefully it'll help you out if you're going to do a set of carbs on an inline 4 rack like this. As you can see, I've already stripped these carbs down. Float bowls, jets, diaphragms, pilot screws, pilot fuel screws, the whole bit, pilot jets, everything's out. Everything's over here, organized as to carb by number. Okay, you don't really have to do that on a lot of parts. Like for example, the springs are all the same on this carb. I just like to do it this way, organization-wise, all right? I'm going to go ahead and move these parts out of the way so there's no risk of knocking this stuff over and going all over the floor. And then we're going to come back and go over a few thoughts about unracking these carbs and when to do it, when to strip them completely, things like that. All right, so you might ask yourself when you want to strip the carbs completely down just to separate them or just separate them. There's a couple of scenarios in which you do either one. I'm going to cover them both here really briefly, because I think this will help you make the decision. Now, the reason why I'm doing it is going to be heir apparent here in a second, but let's go over some scenarios. Number one, let's say you got a bike that you're either buying or working on, and the owner or the current owner says, just went through the carbs, and there's evidence of that. In other words, you believe them, and he's rebuilt them, set the float heights properly, cleaned them so clean that a brain surgeon could do surgery inside of them, and now you have an external fuel leak coming from, for example, a fuel tee or a fuel joint. Now in that case, assuming that you're comfortable with the information provided about the internals of the carbs, you will not need to strip these racks down like you see it here. All right, you just need to unrack the carbs, take the joints out, the fuel tee joints, and then replace the fuel joints and fuel tee with appropriate O-rings, or maybe even new ones if you can find the billet aluminum ones, and then put them back together. There's one caveat to that, and I'll go over there here in a second. Now the other scenario is, like we have here, 99 out of 100 times you're going to get a rack on a bike that's got an external leak. And the reason why is because of overall deterioration of the rubber parts. Ethanol fuel, for example, will get at these O-rings, because remember, the whole purpose of these O-rings is to prevent fuel from leaking externally through this, if you want to call it a fuel rail. And so therefore, the fuel has to be contacting at least half of that O-ring, right, on the inside half. So that ethanol fuel just eats at these O-rings and deteriorates them, which is probably why these took a crap. So if you think about it, if you have a carb with either, a rack of carbs rather, with either an unknown status as to what the insides look like, or you don't know how long they've been sitting, or they look like crud on the outside, and so forth, then if you have an external fuel leak due to O-ring problems, then you most likely have an internal problem with any O-rings or any other parts inside there. For example, the O-rings that seal the float seats. This particular carb rack uses those, these particular Keihins rather. They're not pressed in. Well, they're not a screwed in one. You can have float seats that have an actual thread on them and a little sealing washer. These push in and they have a screw that seats them in. Let me show you one. This is what they look like in this particular bike, your float seat. Now there's nothing wrong with these and nothing wrong with these O-rings, because just a few years ago I changed these out. And they're very proud of the outside body of this, with this O-ring groove meets the body of this seat. So I'm not going to worry about it. I'm just going to clean them out, and we're going to reuse these. But again, if you have a carburetor that has, or rack of carbs rather, that has external leaking problems due to O-ring failures, it could be very possible that these O-rings and any others that the inside of the carb uses, depending on the style of the carbs and the setup, are bad as well. So in that case, and again, that's the vast majority of the case, what I do is, and what I recommend everybody do is, you strip these things down completely, get all the parts off them, and then you unrack them that way, because you're going to have to individually clean these anyway, especially if you're going to do a ultrasonic clean. I do not recommend taking an entire rack that is racked up of 4 carbs or otherwise, and that has the fuel joints and so forth all connected, and putting them into any type of a solution, whether it's petroleum based or water based, and putting them in an ultrasonic. You're just asking for trouble, in my opinion. You're just going to cause problems. You also have these joints up here, which are the vents for the carbs. There's O-rings in there. I did not order these because number one, I think I have them, and number two, they're insignificant compared to the fuel rail, if you will, the O-rings along this line here with the T is and the joints. All right, so that is, I think, what you got to think about when you're going to unrack these things, whether you need to actually tear them down or not. And I just did a rack that I did not film for customer. He sent me a rack of VM carbs from a GS1000, a 78 GS1000. And they look almost identical to the carbs, the makinis on both the the Z1R and also the 900, the KZ900. Those I took off, I unracked as well and cleaned each one individually and then put it all back together. And he had provided me new metal joints and a new metal fuel tee as far as putting those carbs and connecting this rail together for distribution of fuel. So, and that was another situation where I'm like, well, I really don't know the status of the inside of these carbs. They didn't look bad. He had said, well, you probably don't need to do anything on the inside of the carbs, and I differed with that opinion, so I ended up going through them anyway. And again, since it needed to be unracked to do the fuel connectors, I figure why not just do it that way. But you don't always need to disassemble these things to do these fuel connectors. But the last caveat that I mentioned before, I will mention now. If you have carbs that are intact and you are just going to take them apart, as far as separate them, not strip them down like this, just to replace these fuel joints and fuel T, 99 out of 100 times as well, there's a little crud, a little corrosion in these holes, these bores, where these joints in this T goes. You got to clean that out. You usually use some sort of wire brush or something like that, or a piece of Scotch-Brite, and just kind of twist it in there and break up that stuff, but you're going to have to flush it out. Well, it's almost impossible to flush it out. You'll end up flushing it in, and it's going to go in the float bowl and become an obstruction for your pilot circuit. So at the least, what you're probably going to have to do in that situation is pop the float bowls off, take the floats and the float valves out. You can leave the seats in for the most part, unless they have a little filter on the back side of it. Then you're going to have to remove these as well. Do that work on these little bores here to make sure they are completely clean and no crud or anything, because they will leak if there's any crud left in there. Then put them back together, put your floats back in, your float bowls rather back on, and then you can put your new joints in and reassemble the rack. All right, so that's the only caveat to that. If you have a completed rack that you're confident that you don't have to tear them all down like I've done here, would be that right there. That's the only caveat to it. Now, if you take it apart and look at it and they look pristine, perfect, no problem. Wipe them out maybe with a little Q-tip with some alcohol, blow that out with some compressed air very gently, take any dust out of there, and then you can reassemble it, as I said before, as far as putting a rack back together. So I just wanted to cover those few things because I think you'll find it helpful in making a decision whether or not you need to totally strip these things down or not when you unrack them to do the fuel joint work. Okay, that said, let's get to disassembling real quick here. I didn't mean to be that long-winded, but I wanted to cover that information because I think, again, it's important. So first thing I do is I look overall at the rack and go, okay, how are these things affixed together? In this case, there's two ways that they're affixed. Number one, you have the piece of angle aluminum across the back, which is very common, and you also have a long bolt that runs through. Here's the nut side, and here's the bolt side. and pulls it in this way, kind of, you know, clamps it together. So these will have to be removed to separate the carbs. What you have to be cognizant and a little, not worried, but you got to be a little concerned about these, is right here on all these types of CV carbs, is you have these springs. These are the adjusters for the synchronization. But anyway, these things can be flying springs. So we're going to have to resync this thing anyway. When we unrack these carbs, you always want to do that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to back these adjusters off. It does not matter where they are right now because we are going to bench sync this before it goes back on the bike. But the reason why I do this is it relaxes that little spring inside there. You see how the space increases there? And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take a Mortsky repaired screwdriver, Mortsky repair rather. If you don't know his channel, I would highly recommend him. And you just kind of pop these guys out carefully. Now I can use the magnet side of it to grab it, which is nice about this Mortsky screwdriver. It's got a really strong magnet on that side. So you pop these springs out. You want to get all the springs out, or the ones you can get out, right off the bat. All right, because they're going to go bing everywhere. All right, we'll talk about some other springs too. Let's go ahead and get this one out between 3 and 4. And then we got this one between 1 and 2. And it's just, you know, when you relax the pressure on this thing, they come right out. All right, and that's how I'd put them back in. That we would just back this off, whatever's necessary, and use a pair of needle dick pliers and pop them right in. I've never had a problem doing that before. There's also some springs that are between a couple of the carbs. This one's going to stay. This one is just your main throttle spring, basically. This one's going to stay attached to number 2. Sometimes there's a spring between the center carbs, but there isn't one on these 2 carbs. But there is springs between here. Let me zoom you out a little bit so you can see that. There is a spring here between 1 and 2 and between 3 and 4. Essentially, it kind of pushes the throttle shafts out to keep them in a, I guess, in a set position. So, or to keep them from vibrating. I don't know what exactly its purpose is. It's very difficult to get this one out on these particular carbs when they are racked up because there's very little space between them. So this is one of these deals is as you take them apart, you're going to have to get those springs, and as you put it back together, you got to put them back in or right at the last minute, you know, basically shove them together. So it's one of these things on these particular carbs with these springs, you're going to end up doing several things at once. So now we got the springs out. We're going to go ahead and remove things that are common between the carbs that are not the supporting mechanism. In this case, the only thing we have is the choke arm here, this choke linkage thing. And what it does is it goes down to the enrichers. There it is right there. Let me get my flashlight out. You can see the enricher right in there. And it grabs that enricher by a little linkage and pulls them out, all 4 of them uniformly. All right, but you have to get this thing out of the way. So that's what we're going to do right now. We're just going to take these screws out. There's these special, these are very special screws, little short screws, and there's these special washers behind them. These big nylon washers that go over these little bosses in here, and these things essentially bottom on these bosses. You see these guys right here, they kind of protrude out a little bit. And what these do is it doesn't let the screw pinch down on this. It just stops there so you can torque the screw, and it allows it enough you know, space to move it back. There's enough clearance in there. So we'll take all these out, and then we'll set them aside, make sure we don't lose them like I normally do. I'm just kidding, I don't lose anything except my mind. Looks like I replaced a screw last time I was in here on this one because I think it was missing one if I remember correctly. So that is a different screw. I'm certain I did that. And this, I was missing the, yeah, that's right, I remember now. I was missing that little washer. There's another one behind these, by the way. But this is a nice big flange head screw. This, by the way, is a screw that comes out of a Valkyrie carb that holds down the, I want to say it's the air check valve. I recognize that screw. So it worked pretty well in this application. We'll just reuse it. But now you got this thing off. And sometimes there's a spring on this. The only spring, sometimes there's a separate spring, I should say, that's on the actual arm itself. But for the most part, there's springs inside the enrichers that recoil these things, all right, to bring them back to the, you know, to its resting position, which is closed. All right, so we got that out. Now we got to pull this away gently. And again, there are, see, one's coming with it right there. These guys, oh, two of them actually. There's these little nylon washers behind it, just to keep it from kind of grabbing and making it slide easy. And you pull these guys out and set them aside. All right, so that's the only other thing on this rack that's common to it, besides the you know, the fixturing of the carbs themselves, which we're going to start to do now. This is going to be 8 mil on both sides. Let's see, yeah, it's an 8 mil. So put a little spray on this just to help us out, and see if it turns on the other side or not. Nope, we were able to loosen that up, no problem. Turn this thing and make sure that that long bolt is not froze up in here, because if it is, then you're going to have to lubricate it, maybe heat it a little bit. We're just going to leave this loose right now. And now on the back side, we're going to start taking out these screws. Now these can be tight, 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 like they are. So I'm going to get the little impact gun. And that does not want to work. Nope. Nope. All right, these are stuck, so rather than strip them out, I could use a pair of vice grips on them, you know, but I'm going to try heating them first, because there's really nothing down in here that's going to get ruined from it. We'll get the vents out of the way so they don't get exposed to that, the hoses. We got to be careful, though. We need to reuse these joints. So you're putting some heat down in here. You got to be real careful not to transfer too much heat up to there, because you don't want to melt those. Those are like unobtainium. But I think if we direct a little bit of heat directly at this, they may break loose. Normally these do come out okay, but for some reason these guys are being naughty and they're not cooperating. Another good reason to take everything off the carb if you're going to hit it with a little heat. Because nothing else is going to get ruined from it. Let's try that. Nope. All right. These are really stuck. Probably going to have to replace these screws. So I could heat the bejesus out of these. They're probably not going to go. So I'm going to go ahead and go off camera and have to go, you know, all He-Man on these things. We'll just lay the carbs down off the rack, and I'm going to use a pair of vice grips or pliers or something, break all these loose. Let me show you how tight these are. I've gotten all but these two here. They're not Loctited, I can feel it. When they break loose, you can take them out by hand. That's not Loctite. That's why one reason why I heated it the first time, the first bolt or screw. Because if it's Loctite, that'll help break it loose. But these are extremely tight. Whoops. And just won't come loose without some brute force. Nope. So see how tight that is? I'm putting a lot of torque on that. You don't want to go. Oh. Wow. Come on. Okay, got it. That's a lot of force. So these are tight, real tight. Of course, they're froze up because of time as well. A little bit of corrosion probably. Last one. Okay, got them. All right, let's reset up, take them out. Well, I don't think I have enough screws. These were some nice screws too, these yellowish ones. Damn shame. But they're just stuck. You gotta do what you gotta do. These gotta come apart. This is not an option. I had to modify my setup here, my little old, you know, drill press vise for these carbs. I had to mill a little slot on the back of these back ones to capture the edge of that bottom of that angle aluminum. Otherwise, they just wanted to flip forward. It's not really designed for that. It's designed for a flat piece, like on a, you know, the BS34s and things like that. Now they're going to want to go because this is the only thing holding them in place. So we should be able to just kind of lift them out of this thing. There we go. Now we'll work on the bench because there's no sense in keeping it in that rack anymore. Or not the rack, but my tool, said the wife. So now that we're ready to take out, then the other thing to hold these guys together is this long bolt that we already loosened. Whoops, almost lost a nut. Never mind. Now we'll carefully pull this out. This will get all good and cleaned and see all the corrosion on it. We'll clean this up real well and put a thin layer of grease on it when we put it in, so we'll not do that again. So now they want to kind of get pushed apart because of the springs that are between them here, but all we're going to do is just start pulling them apart just like you normally would. We don't have to worry about a spring here, only between these carbs there. Just kind of wiggle them out. Just be very careful of these fuel connectors. See, it's kind of stuck. Probably because there's a little gunk and corrosion in there. Sometimes she needs a little help in the form of some leverage. I got these plastic wedges from Harbor Freight years ago, and these things work pretty damn good for doing stuff like this. It fills up the gap and then you can kind of lever it a little. There it goes, popped out. It's just stuck on that one side there. You may have noticed or not, see if we can catch it in editing, that this spring between these two carbs went boing, ended up about 15 feet away on the floor. So you gotta be real careful with these. And so I was concentrating on that and didn't see it, but I did see it go boing away. I don't really worry about it too much because I have these, but if you don't have any of those, you can get them, but you know, just try to be more careful than I was. So we'll just set this aside. That's number 4. Do the same thing for number 3. There it goes. That was a little easier. See how the reason why they're leaking is because they're not only flattened, but they're deteriorated to the point where they're breaking down. The material is actually breaking down the rubber, and it just sticks in there, plus a little corrosion. And by the way, speaking of rubber, I'm pretty sure, like I said, I have these. But these are the vents, by the way. These are the vents that go between the two carbs. Let's see, in this case it's 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 to vent these carbs. Atmospheric vent. I'm pretty sure I got these O-rings. If not, I'm just gonna, I've already put my order in. I'll just have to call them tomorrow at Partzilla and add them to the order. They're not cheap. They're like $4 something a piece, so I didn't order them, but oh well. Probably should have. Probably will. So that's number 3. Now we got another spring here. And this one come off. This one come off without a fight. That's the way they should come apart. And then fuel joint. That over there, that over there, and put this over there. This is again the vent, or the atmospheric vent. We'll replace those O-rings. They're pretty bad. Now you got 4 unracked carbs ready to do whatever you decide to do with them. You know, whether it's, you know, play hockey with them, clean them, give them to the dog as a toy, whatever you want. But in this case, we're gonna reuse them. So like I said, this spring just stays there because it seats up against this feature in the on the carb itself, which is, you know, typical. There's our main fuel delivery tee. I looked online, I cannot find this in like a metal aftermarket, which is a shame. I ought to make one. Hell, I got a freaking lathe, but I'm not gonna. These look pretty good. We'll just put new O-rings on them, which are ordered. So there you go. That's in fairly detailed format of how to unrack these CV carbs without all the other disassembly, because that's pretty obvious, pretty standard. All right, you're good. So that's how I do it, and hope you got something out of that. The next, let's see, the next clips are going to be, I don't think I'm going to film anything regarding rebuilding or putting it back together. It's just the reverse of what I'm doing here. So what I'm going to do is, for the sake of brevity, hopefully this video isn't too long, I'm going to get all these carbs back together, take a number of days, I don't know how long it's going to take to get parts in. When we go to put them back on the bike, we'll fire the camera back up. It's going to only take a few moments to get these things back in. They're pretty easy on this setup. Slam the air box on, put some fuel to it from an auxiliary source to the fuel pump. Off camera, I'm going to clean all that out too. I may actually replace the filter. And then we'll fire it up and see what the difference is. Let's go ahead and get these carbs installed. Wait, we're not done yet? Oh yeah, that's right. Ta-da! All right, if we did our job right, it should run pretty good. Not sure where the idle is. You know, I always turn these down anyway. I'm gonna turn the idle back a little bit. And what I'm doing here is I'm applying fuel to the fuel pump. So I did change those hoses out. All right, it's probably gonna crank a bit before it fires off because it doesn't start pumping the fuel pump until it cranks. And we are in neutral, we're good. Check the oil, everything good there. Throttle is closed. Hell of a lot better than it was, but yeah, blowing a little smoke there. But you know, the way this thing was running before, I wouldn't be surprised, because if you look down inside the intakes, man, there's a lot of crud in there. So we need to burn that crap off. But I'm gonna go ahead and get the. I'm not gonna film this. You've seen it 1,000 times. I'm gonna go ahead and get my carb tune hooked up to it, and we'll do a synchronization. And you know, you've seen it 1,000 times because this video is getting long anyway. So let's. I'm going to shut you down. I'm going to go do that, and we'll see what the end result is. Smoking almost like it's running rich, but it doesn't smell like oil and it doesn't smell like gas. And so the only thing I can think of is that there's just so much crud in there from the bad gas, from him running it that way, the customer running it that way. It's probably in the exhaust system and it's burning off the valves, certainly the intake valves. They were real crusty, you can tell. But the way it's run, I don't smell any oil, like oil burning. As you can hear, she's pretty much back to her old self when it comes to running. I think I might just run it a little bit longer and see what happens, because like I said, you know, being liquid cooled and with all that crud that was in there, as I mentioned before, it certainly could be part of it, you know. We got a few other things to do anyway, like flush the brakes, and I haven't done the clutch side yet. I haven't finished the clutch sleeve cylinder deal. So we'll get to that as well. I mean, I have the cover on and everything. I've gotten all that done. We'll show you that when it's all done. But anyway, like I said, I don't want to go too blabbermouth on this because it's jabberjawing, because the video's long enough already. All right, folks, this job's pretty much done. Tank's back. Well, you can see what's back on. I don't have to tell you that. I've got the gas on, and I have gas in the tank, about 1.5 gallons worth or so. I'm not going to even put the enricher on. I swear to God, I have not run this yet today. It needs to run more. Go ahead and let it warm up a bit. I'm gonna go ahead and put it down while we're waiting. Idle's actually a little low. I turned it down yesterday. Let's put it back up. It should be about 1,000. That's better. There's gonna be a little crap burning off because I degreased underneath there. There was some oil underneath there, so I degreased it. We'll let that burn off. We're pretty much getting up to op temp now. You can see the temperature gauge there. Getting close. No more smoking. That's good enough. So yeah, we are definitely 100% here. I'm not going to take it for a test ride because I know how this thing's going to behave because I'm familiar with it. So we're just going to call the customer, let them know it's done, and it'll be as delivered for them. I'm going to do the tire pressures. There's another video coming out that'll be a midweek machining video that relates to this bike. And what it is I ended up replacing the plastic fuel tees and the fuel joints with aluminum. Now I said earlier in the video that you can't get the aluminum aftermarket or otherwise, and that still holds true unless you have a lathe. So here's the plastic one. This is the fuel tee. I made the joints as well, but this is the more complicated part. This one's the first example of it. This is the second iteration, or iteration, whatever that word is, which actually has the nipple on it and everything. But I made this exactly the same spec as, you know, to the critical parts as the plastic one for both the fuel tee and the joints. Also, flush the brakes out. The brake fluid was pretty bad. Here's the clutch side. You remember this was all peeled off as far as paint from brake fluid, so that's all done. There was a number of other things I did which are not really relevant to this, but I'm really happy the way it came out. I think those aluminum fuel joints and tee will serve them really well. I hope you enjoyed the video. Hope you got something out of it. Hope it wasn't too long. If you like what you saw, you know what you need to do. You stick around, you see other projects. We do have a new project in. Till next time, I sure appreciate you watching this one. Don't just repair, restore. We'll catch you on the next video.